Okay, so good morning, everybody. Really appreciate you taking, I think, what's only going to be about 45 minutes here to spend some time with us this morning and hopefully learn some tips that will make the recovery process a bit easier for you. We have our operation in Panama City that's been open since Hurricane Matthew, I think it was a few years ago now. And so we're glad that we're able to be on the ground right now in Sarasota and Lee and DeSoto County. But if you have any questions at the end of the session, I'll put my email up. If you want to reach out to me and ask me any personal or one-on-one questions, please feel free to reach out. And if I can't answer them, I'll surely get you in touch with somebody who can. Okay, so just to jump into it, a little bit about who SBP is. So SBP, previously known as the St. Bernard Project, we got our start about, oh man, probably 2 decades ago now in the St. Bernard Parish after Hurricane Katrina. And so since then, we've grown into a national organization responding to Joplin, Missouri after the 2011 EF5 tornado went through there, New York and New Jersey after Hurricane Sandy, and then unfortunately we've just kept growing since there. So we've been in Houston since Harvey, Florida, I mentioned, Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, and South Carolina as well. So from that collective experience, we've learned a lot that we have now packaged here to be able to share with you to hopefully make this recovery a bit easier for you. And we do that in a series of 5 different ways that if you're interested in learning more about, you can check out our website. Okay, so just to start, I always like to start the sessions talking about a few really key components here. So you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a QR code that is brought to us by our fantastic partners at AT&T. It's called Equip. It's available in your app store, but importantly, it includes all of the data and content that I'm going to be talking about today. So don't feel like you have to copy everything down. All of the PDFs, videos, everything I'll mention is going to be linked in that app. So also importantly, really want to hone in on this one, but you're your best advocate. As you go through this process, it's surely a marathon and not a sprint. And so pace yourself, go at a speed that is comfortable for you. When you're not sure about something, ask questions. Like, if nothing else from this presentation, I hope it makes you feel a bit more empowered to ask questions of everybody, your insurance agents, your FEMA and SBA representatives, and even the nonprofit sector. If you're working with somebody in the nonprofit sector, you can still ask them, why they've made decisions that they've made, and appeal those decisions. So if you aren't comfortable or don't understand why a decision was made, again, advocate for yourself and ask a lot of questions. And then in support of that, receipts are going to be your best friend here. So lots of documentation, even as specific as if you have gone and bought gas for your generator and you forgot to, press yes, I want a receipt at the pump. You can still take a picture of the pump with the dollar amount that you paid on it, because that photo is going to be time-stamped. So even to that granular level, really important that you're getting receipts for everything. And then if you do need a little extra support, SAMHSA, which is an organization full of psychologists and psychiatrists, totally free and available for your for anybody, you or your friends or relatives that need a little extra support. Their number is there, and also 988 is a new hotline that's available to folks too. So please either use those or share them with your networks if you feel like anybody needs it. Okay, so first I'll talk about just immediate resources that are available to you. So here, I'll start on the right side of the screen, crisis cleanup. If you're not familiar with them and you want to jot that number down, that's a good number to take. But I also am going to be sending out a PDF copy of the slides and the recording, like I mentioned to you after. But anyway, crisis cleanup is a connector. So anybody who's survived and went through Hurricane Ian now can get on there, say what their needs are. It could be anything from, I need a tarp on my roof, or it could be, I need baby formula and diapers for my children. And so they'll put that information anonymously into a system, and then a nonprofit that's able to support those requests will reach out to you and find out if you still need those services, and they'll come out and support you. So great service there. I know there's still probably a lot of Wi-Fi and connectivity issues. And so this is run by a group called ITDRC, and they're providing free connectivity services. Operation Blue Roof, I'll talk about that in a later slide, but they are providing free blue tarp roofs to eligible homes. And then 211. So if you have any other outstanding needs, or you're just really not sure where to start, you can try 211, and they'll be able to give you, get you over to the appropriate service. And then you'll see on the left, I have IA declared counties. And what that means, we'll get into it a little bit later. But now, since Hurricane Ian has been declared, what happens is the president has to make a declaration, and he can do it in one of two ways. He can say public assistance is available per county, which means that there's going to be funds to support infrastructure, bridges, public buildings, houses of worship, and or individual assistance is available. And individual assistance is what's going to be important for you all. That's going to provide the repairs and property, personal property reimbursements that are available. So if you are on the call and you live in any of these counties, individual assistance is available to you. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I just wanted to highlight, if you live in any of these counties, that assistance is available to you. Okay, so some financial resources available to you. This one I'm not going to go into super in-depth, but if you have any legal services, there's some questions about the title or deed or ownership of your home, you can call Bay Area Legal Services. And if you have any insurance questions, I'll talk a little bit about insurance, but the United Policyholders is really like the experts in homeowner, renter, flood insurance policy. And they're actually going to have a free webinar in a few weeks. I think it's November 2nd that you can register for, and I have the link there. And then SBP also has our own FEMA Help Center. So in a minute, you'll see all of the assistance that FEMA is providing. But if you want to just talk to someone kind of like in a human to human way, FEMA can get a little confusing with the language they use. If you want real simple broken down language, you can call us, and that's our FEMA Help Center, 800-276-9511, and somebody there will be able to talk you through it. Okay, so I said Operation Blue Roof earlier. So what Operation Blue Roof is, it's administered for free from the Army Corps of Engineers. Basically, what you need to know here is that it's those blue roofs that you might see, or blue tarps that you might see going up on roofs now in your community. Totally free. All you have to do is call. They are closed on October 23rd, or they're closing, sorry, on October 23rd. They will no longer be taking applications after October 23rd, and that's just in maybe a week and a half now. So call as soon as possible if you haven't already. Generally, they only tarp primary residences, but they are making exceptions on a case-by-case basis. So I can't tell you that if you have multiple properties, they'll tarp your home, but worth a call. Definitely worth a call. They're a great agency. We've worked with them before, and they're great. So if you can make a call to them and see if they can come out, we highly recommend it. Okay, and then again, in the vein of really supporting you with advocating for yourself, in-person meetings with folks is available. I've listed, maybe this is 10 counties here that have disaster recovery centers available in your community where you can go and sit down in person with somebody from FEMA, from SBA, from a whole plethora of different agencies. And so if you have time, if you're available during these hours, they're pretty much all 7 days a week at various different hours of the day, but you can go and talk to folks. So if this is something you're interested in, I would recommend taking down these addresses and reaching out. Okay, so what to expect as you start the recovery process. Okay, so financial resources for recovery here, the two major things here that I want to note are the real differences between FEMA and your insurance company. Your insurance company is really going to replace like with like versus FEMA that's only meant to make your home safe, sanitary, and livable again. And so, of course, you're not going to receive as much funding from FEMA. Even the max award for FEMA, I think it's $37,000, which I'll get to more in a minute, but that's not generally going to be enough to replace everything that you need in your home and any repairs that you need to make to your home. And so if you have insurance and you haven't reached out to them, now's the time to get in touch. Also, anyone carrying a mortgage is generally going to be required to have homeowners insurance. And sometimes those homeowners insurance policies have an automatic flood insurance component. And so you might not be sure completely if you have flood insurance, but if you have any paperwork that says NFIP on it, which stands for the National Flood Insurance Program, that actually is flood insurance, totally separate from FEMA. NFIP is a federal program, but it's totally separate from FEMA. They just are both through the federal government, but that's going to be your flood insurance. And so really important that you call and start talking to agents at your insurance company to understand everything that your policies cover. And then any, monthly bills that you get or lenders that you work with, your credit cards, student loans, auto loans, if you haven't already, again, really important that you call them. There's two different programs that are generally available to survivors of Ian, and that's deferment or forbearance. Deferment means you will not accrue interest, whereas if you put your loan in forbearance, you will accrue interest. Of course, they won't tell you that up front, and so ask for deferment first. If they don't have it and they offer you a forbearance program, okay, but at least you've asked and advocated for yourself to get the best program, which would be deferment. Okay, so while you're considering talking to all these agencies and trying to figure out what they're all going to need, I've listed a whole bunch of documents here, but the four main components of it are proof of who you are, proof of identity. So who you're saying, proof that you are who you say you are. And that's going to be with Social Security, birth certificate, your ID, proof your income is what you say your income is, proof that you own the property. So that's going to be your title and deed. And so that's where the legal assistance can come in. And believe it or not, proof of damages. If you have any photos of your home before, if you have now photos after, we highly encourage lots of photos and videos room by room after. So now while everything is still pretty raw, go in and take as many photos and videos as you can. And then you'd want to submit before photos and videos if you can collect it, because that's going to be something that different agencies are going to require. And with the income, there's a lot of different programs that are income based, or the eligibility is income based. And so that's why we say start collecting some income information. Okay, so now you're getting into the cleanup, right? So there's lots of free organizations, and I mean, really, there's been just a tremendous outpouring from church groups and volunteer organizations from across the country that are coming in to Florida, if they're not already there, to support with the cleanup. So again, Crisis Cleanup here is a great connector to those nonprofit resources, but also your neighbors. We've all been through COVID for a while now, and this is a good time to come out. You can, be outside, talk to folks, and help each other kind of remove any items from your homes, and or start taking pictures with each other and getting any of the items out of the home. And that's all free. Okay, so just a continuation of that. So while you're removing the items from your home, important that when insurance agents and FEMA and even SBA, when they come out and inspect your home, they're going to want to see, again, proof, right? So saving samples of any high grade materials, carpet, upholstery, furniture, you're going to want to save that as much as possible. If you can leave it out front of your house, like, behind the curb, so that they can see these are the items that I had to remove from my home. If, little lizards and critters start getting in there, of course, you have to keep everything safe and sanitary so you can get that hauled away. But taking lots of photos of even the items outside of your home before they get hauled away. And then you are going to be responsible for making reasonable repairs to the home to prevent further damage. So turning off your water, turning off your electric, just making sure any debris that's on your roof can be cleared if you can do that safely. So mold, once everything gets removed from your house, the next step really is going to be mold remediation and mold suppression. So mold is a living organism. It's a fungus. It's not the same as bacteria. It can only be killed with something called fungicide. And so any items that you use that just say, clean and remove or just clean mold, those are not going to actually kill the mold. What you're looking for is a fungicide that will actually kill it. And we recommend two products. One's called Concrobium, that's in the right-hand side, and the other is Shockwave. Both of those are going to be, they're a little bit more expensive than, bleach, but bleach does not kill mold. Bleach has its own purpose, but it does not kill mold. And so what will happen if you don't remediate the mold correctly is that now, while you have funds from the federal government and their insurance agency, you have the money to go get new drywall, insulation, all of the things you'll need, you'll put it back up. And then it's Florida. I'm in New York. We have hot, humid summers, definitely not as hot and humid as Florida, but in a few months, that mold is going to just start to grow right back. And then you're going to have to remove all of the new drywall, insulation, flooring that you just put in, and you're not going to have the funds available to you to replace it again. And so in the long run, it's a lot cheaper to just purchase the Concrobium and the Shockwave now and do it the correct way than wait. Not to mention all of the horrendous side effects of having mold growing in your home, especially if there's elderly or children in the home or anybody who has respiratory issues. That's going to really significantly impact their health. And so cheaper, definitely, to do it this way with the Concrobium and Shockwave now, but also tremendously safer. So as you're beginning to search for contractors then, after you've done as much as you can in your home, important key pieces here are you're going to want only licensed and insured contractors. That means that they're going to give you, they can show you copies of their insurance, they can give you copies of their licensing, but you want to have seen that and get copies of that. Because unfortunately, after disasters, as much as it brings out the absolute best in society, and all the churches and voluntary groups coming out now show that, but it also brings out some of the worst sides of humanity with a lot of contractor fraud. And so to protect yourself, it's important that you're getting copies of this information, and then multiple estimates. So, you talk to your friend Joe Smith, who recommends ABC Contractor. Go and find another contractor in addition to ABC Contractor to compare pricing. You never need to be telling contractors how much money you got from insurance or FEMA. They don't need to know that. You should absolutely not be signing over checks to them. Even for payments, don't pay them everything up front. Don't pay them, I would say, anything up front. If their business model is not such that they can't front $1,500 or $3,000 worth of work to get them started, that's probably not someone you want to work with. And so if your total, the work that you need is $5,000 or more, pay them 50% of it after 50% of the work is done. Go look at it, see if you're comfortable with it, and then release the first amount of funding. And then again, after the last 50% is done, go take a look. If you're good with it, give them the last 50%. But really important that you have that protection for yourself. Okay, and so then just to recap on that, you're going to search for any reputable programs that are in your area that are providing free assistance, like the churches and nonprofits that I mentioned through crisis cleanup. Going to be using all your due diligence when selecting a contractor, documenting expenses and receipts. And even with the receipts, and I wanted to mention, if you do experience contractor fraud, really important that you file a police report, because that police report is going to act as your receipt showing that, hey, this contractor, provided fraudulent work and fraudulent information to me. This is now the receipt of the money that I gave him and where it went. And then another piece is, as much as you can, if you had 12 inches of water that covered your electrical outlets in your home, while everything is open, while the walls are open, consider elevating your electrical outlets, maybe 18 or 24 inches, so that if you get another 12 inches of water, hopefully not, you'll have that level of protection when you have that water in again. And it's a really easy thing to do. Just have the contractor elevate up your electrical outlets 18, 24 inches. And so you're a little bit more protected. So little ways like that where you can reduce future risks as you're rebuilding now. Okay, so now we'll get into insurance. So again, with insurance, you want to contact them immediately if you haven't already. A lot of the time, your insurance agents and any inspectors that come out are going to provide you with additional funds, or with the funds that you actually need, if you're able to provide them with contractor estimates. And so that goes back to making sure you're working with reputable contractors, but you want to get 2 to 3 contractor estimates to submit to your insurance company as soon as possible. And remember, again, your insurance adjusters are meant to work with you. They're not meant to just give you a settlement amount and then leave. If you don't understand it, ask why. Don't feel rushed. Go sit in person with them and ask questions. You can also ask to see your claim and understand like how they got to the decision they got to. And then also important, once you do receive money from insurance, really crucial that you only spend it on what it's meant to be spent on. So often with FEMA and insurance company, they'll give you funding, and then if you say, oh, this funding was only meant for repairs, but I also don't have a washer, dryer, or stove, I'm going to go buy a stove and washer, dryer. If they come back and audit you, and this again goes for FEMA and SBA and insurance, you could have to repay the funds that you received if they can tell that it wasn't spent on the repairs for your home that it was meant to be spent on, and that you spent it on a stove and washer and dryer are also needed items, but that is not what that money was earmarked for. And so just be really careful that you're spending it on exactly what it's meant to be spent on. Okay, so some differences between homeowners insurance, renters insurance, and flood insurance. Renters insurance is really only going to cover personal property and any possessions that were damaged, whereas homeowners insurance is going to cover obviously losses to the home and property, and any other disaster related expenses that your policy included. With homeowners and renters insurance, often those policies are really hard to decipher and understand. And so you can take a look at the declaration page of those policies, and those are really simple ways to understand like a summary of your coverages and what is included and not included in your policy. And then flood insurance, if you have it, NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program, I would say 90% of flood insurances are backed by NFIP, but there's 10% of them that are private. And so figure out, what kind of insurance you have for your flood insurance. But big difference between flood insurance and homeowners is that flood can also reimburse your preventative steps that you took. So like if you bought sandbags, if you rented a, say, storage unit to put some of your personal property before Ian came through, you might be able to get all of that reimbursed. And they'll also additionally be able to cover obviously repairs and losses to your home and property. Okay, federal assistance. So this is going to be the FEMA and SBA piece. So with FEMA, if you haven't already, we absolutely encourage you to apply. Even if you had a fence, just a fence down on your property, or like a few shingles off of your roof. Because if you don't apply, the window is only open for FEMA applications for, I think it's 90 days. So that'll be probably end of November. I have to get the date here, but you only have 90 days to apply for FEMA. If you don't apply for FEMA now, and that window closes, and 3 months or 4 months from now, you realize that 2 or 3 shingles that came off your roof are now causing water to come into your ceiling, and you didn't get any support from your insurance company, maybe you didn't have insurance, you're not going to be eligible, or it's going to be really difficult for you to go and apply for FEMA. So that's why I say anybody with any sort of even the tiniest amount of damage, apply for FEMA. You might not need anything from them now. They might deny your application, but at least you get an application in, and it's a whole lot easier to go back and open an application or appeal an application, which we'll get into, than to have nothing and the window close and you miss it. It's not impossible to get back in, but difficult. And so the hotline number 800-621-3362 is just 621 FEMA. You can give them a call and submit an application. It doesn't take that long. The application itself is not actually that complicated, but there are questions that you might have, and so you might want to call the hotline, and then you can track your application on disasterassistance.gov. Okay, so what is available through FEMA, right? Because there's so many different questions about FEMA, but I tried to break down some of the programs here. And so for renters, absolutely can also apply for FEMA. Renters and homeowners alike can apply for temporary housing assistance, which means that they'll pay for you to be in either a hotel or a rental unit while you're unable to live in your home, or they'll provide you with a trailer or some space to live in while you're unable to live in your home. So functional needs assistance, if you have any accessibility modification needs, they'll now provide you with additional funds for those needs. Previously, if you needed a wheelchair ramp, you were supposed to use the money that you got for your repairs to pay for that wheelchair ramp. But they've just in the past few years have realized that's obviously unfair. Folks with wheelchair ramps need additional money on top of their housing assistance fund. And so they've now made that accessible. So there's that program. Housing assistance, that's the main program where you're going to be able to get your repair needs met. Again, if you do get repair housing assistance, it can only go towards repairs. We'll talk about ONA in a minute, other needs assistance. That's going to be for personal property. But if you get housing assistance money, it can only go towards, you know, actual repairs. So drywall, roofing, siding, all of that type of work. And then critical assistance services, they actually increased this, and I haven't updated it, just heard this a few days ago, but it's now $700. So, excuse me, you can, if you apply for FEMA now, there's also a possibility that they'll just give you direct deposit, $700 or a check that you can spend on whatever critical needs that you have right now. So it's now $700. And then ONA, other needs assistance, that's for personal property, like I mentioned, but also any medical, dental, funeral, childcare services that maybe you incurred while you've been out of your home, or that the items that were lost or damaged from Ian. Okay, so what is SBA and why is it important, or why might FEMA ask you to apply? So SBA is the Small Business Administration, which you might be thinking, well, I'm not a small business. Why would I have to apply for this? Well, FEMA does not have the ability to do background checks or financial checks, credit checks, all of that. But SBA does. And so after federal declaration, which I mentioned in one of our first slides, that if you live in any of those counties that were IA declared, SBA now kind of pivots and becomes available for homeowners as well. And so what that means is if you apply to FEMA, they might want to do like a credit or financial check on you, but they don't have the means to do that. And so then they'll refer you to SBA. SBA additionally, other than doing the financial check, they have a disaster program where they provide very low interest rate loans that are, I think, in the like 1.5% to 3.5% over 30-year fixed period for Hurricane Ian survivors that can give you up to $200,000. So where FEMA's only going to be able to give you $37,900, that's obviously not going to be enough to repair your whole home. You could get up to $200,000 with SBA, and you're not required to do it if you just want to apply for FEMA and you see through SBA you get approved for a $200,000 loan that you don't want to incur. You can decline it, and you can also negotiate it. If you get approved for $200,000 and you can't afford that, or you don't want that, you only want, say, $100,000, you can tell SBA, hey, I only need $100,000, and they'll work with you on a rate and an amount that you're comfortable with. One thing to note here, secondary homes cannot qualify for SBA, but renters absolutely can. A very good friend of mine lives in Northport, and her roof and ceiling collapsed in her bedroom and all the windows blew out from Ian, and she just applied and was approved for SBA yesterday, and she's like very happy about it. She did not have renter's insurance, and so this is hugely helpful for her to replace her items. And then if you do get an SBA loan, you cannot use it to upgrade your home unless you're required by local building code. And so, like I mentioned, if your walls are open and your electrical outlets are damaged and they're pre the current building code, you'll have to bring all of those up to the new standard. But you can't do upgrades like if you had a laminate countertop, now put in a granite countertop. Those type of upgrades are not allowed. Okay, so FEMA damage assessments. So because we're still in the age of COVID here, sometimes the FEMA inspector will only do a partial in-person inspection, or the whole inspection will be remote. And so if it's remote, it's really important that you're being as absolutely detailed as possible. Again, with the pictures and videos that you have, that's going to be really helpful. But as much as you can say, not that I had 12 inches of water in my house, you say, I have a slab on grade foundation and we received 12 inches of water covering my electrical outlets in my kitchen, living room, and dining room. And the flooring is warped and bubbling now, and the water came in kind of like a surge tidal wave into my home, and that's how the water came in, and then it receded. Or you can say it came in through the floor, sat for days, and then receded. There's differences there, and so they want to hear all of that. Additionally, and really, really important, if an inspector, or if there's any questions from FEMA along the lines of, do you have immediate needs? Answer yes or unknown, or the question of, can you live in your home? In the case of my friend, and she knows I'm using her as an example, so it's fine, but she did not have any place else to live for the first few days, and she has a young daughter, she's a single mom, and she had to live in her home. Even though the roof was completely collapsed over her bedroom, she lived in her home for the first few days, and she would have answered yes to that question. Had I not told her, don't answer yes, she would have said, yes, I can live in my home, but only because she had no place else to go. She eventually did get out of there, but really important that you say no, even if you have no place else to go and you are living in your home. Don't answer yes. Say, nope, not able to live in the home, or unknown. And do you have immediate needs? Yes. Because just saying no to those questions could literally make you denied for those programs that are going to give you the most amount of funding. And then again, if I mentioned this whole hybrid thing where you might have to do a remote inspection, if an inspector does actually come out to your home, unfortunately, there's been a lot of FEMA representation fraud. And so you can combat that by asking for the last 4 digits of your FEMA application number. So like I said, you're going to get in your FEMA application today, hopefully, if you haven't already, and then it's going to shoot back a number that says, this is your FEMA application number. You can memorize it, write it in your phone, put it on a Post-it, whatever you need to do, throw it in your wallet. But then anybody who comes to your home saying that they're FEMA, you ask them to repeat back to you the last 4 digits of that number. Because if they are truly with FEMA, they'll know that number and be able to tell you. And if they can't say it back to you, you go right inside and you call up the FEMA number and say, hey, there's somebody out here impersonating FEMA, and they'll take care of it. But just important that you don't let anybody else into your home if they're not actually with FEMA. Okay, and then reporting damages, again, if you're doing remote work with FEMA, you're going to create that really detailed list. Every closet, every bedroom, even if it's a bedroom that, you know, your cousin lives in or sleeps in and you're not supposed to go in there and they don't think anything was damaged, go in there anyway, and take pictures and document everything. And then we also have a damage assessment guide at SBP Protects that you can take a look at, or again, the Equip app that has a really good checklist of the type of language and information to collect. Another note with FEMA, other than the inspectors, even with your insurance company, it's important to have as much of this communication documented as possible. So email, text, certified letter, that's a good way to communicate with these folks, only because somebody from your insurance company or FEMA could say something to you and actually be with FEMA or your insurance company, but say something to you that is incorrect, and you'll go down that path of whatever they tell you. And then you won't know until months later that that was incorrect, and you'll have no record of it. So of course, you're going to have to answer the phone and talk to people occasionally, but as much as you can get records of those conversations, it's really important. And also with the FEMA inspector, they'll only call or text you 3 times from totally unknown area codes and numbers. And if you don't answer, call them back, you can be removed from the program. Like, it's that simple. So if you don't, so I know everybody gets a lot of spam calls. I get a lot of spam calls too. But just in the next few weeks, months that you're working with FEMA, answer the unknown calls, because it could be an inspector trying to get in touch with you. Okay, appealing. So I mentioned way earlier that if you don't understand a decision, ask questions, even appeal things with the nonprofit sector or your insurance company. You can file additional claims. It's really important with FEMA that you appeal. I think it's only 4% of disaster survivors across the US appeal their decisions. But what's really sad is that FEMA will send ineligibility letters or denial letters as just like part of the process and part of the conversation. And anybody who has, you know, never applied for government support before is going to see that letter and think, oh my gosh, like, I didn't want to apply in the first place. I'm certainly not going to like argue this. And that's the end of it. But FEMA literally expects people to argue that decision. And so really important that within 60 days of getting that denial or ineligibility letter, you are reaching back out to them and saying you want to appeal it, and get extra clarification. You can go again to those disaster recovery centers, like I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, and sit down with somebody and talk to them, or you can call SBP. We also, like I mentioned, have a helpline where you'll talk to a person without using FEMA language and just normal language, and help you through that appeal process. But you only have 60 days from the time you're receiving your denial letter. They'll call it an ineligibility letter, but it's going to look like a denial to you. So just to summarize here, and then I believe we're going to wrap up. Really important that you keep notes on your conversations with FEMA, record everything as much as possible, keep copies of all your documentations, never give original copies. You can get certified copies of your birth certificate or title, but don't give your originals. Requesting your file from FEMA and asking lots of questions about what information they use to make their decision. And then including with your appeal letter copies of IDs and as much supporting documentation as possible. When you do get to the appeal process, one thing that we'll recommend is, again, the contractor estimates. That's always going to be really helpful. And then for more questions, you can call the FEMA hotline, 800-621-FEMA, or you can call SBP's helpline. and we'll be able to help you there. Or you can go to those disaster recovery centers in person and sit down with someone. Okay, so I'm going to see if there are any questions. I'll also just leave my email address up here. So if you don't want to, say anything in the chat or come off mute and ask questions, you can just email me privately, and I'll be happy to answer questions or connect you to somebody who might have answers. Okay, so no questions. Going to end the recording, but before I do, I just really appreciate you spending these 45 minutes with me. I know time is really precious. It always is precious, but it's especially unique now with everything you're going through. And so thank you for joining. I hope that this wasn't overwhelming and was more empowering and gave you some tips to go through the recovery process, feeling confident that you have good information. So thank you.